The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Fort Benjamin as Master Sergeant Thomas Rodriguez made his final walk through the base he had called home for the past 3 years. After 22 years of dedicated military service, today marked his last day in uniform. His duffel bag sat packed in his quarters, and his retirement ceremony was scheduled to begin in just 2 hours. The entire battalion had been preparing for weeks to honor one of their most respected soldiers. Thomas had earned his reputation through countless acts of bravery and selfless service. During his tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, he had saved dozens of lives, often putting himself in harm's way without hesitation. His chest bore the evidence of his valor, a bronze star with V device, 3 Purple Hearts, and numerous commendations for heroism under fire. But more than his medals, Thomas was beloved by his fellow soldiers for his unwavering commitment to taking care of his men and never leaving anyone behind. The base buzzed with activity as preparations continued for the ceremony. A large crowd was expected, including Thomas's wife Maria and their 2 teenage children, his elderly parents who had traveled from Texas, and dozens of current and former soldiers whose lives he had touched during his distinguished career. The base commander, Colonel Patricia Hayes, personally overseen the arrangements, ensuring that Thomas would receive the recognition he deserved for his years of faithful service. Private First Class Danny Kim sat alone in the base library, staring at a letter he had been trying to write for the past hour. The 20-year-old soldier had joined the Army just 8 months earlier, fresh out of basic training and eager to serve his country. However, his military experience had been marked by struggle and disappointment. Despite his best efforts, Danny consistently scored at the bottom of his unit in physical fitness tests, a difficulty with complex technical training, and often found himself the target of jokes from other soldiers who saw him as weak and incompetent. The letter Danny was attempting to write was his resignation from the military. He had decided that he simply wasn't cut out for Army life and planned to request discharge under provisions for soldiers who were unable to meet basic military standards. The decision filled him with shame and disappointment, but he felt he had no other choice. Every day brought new evidence that he didn't belong in the same uniform worn by heroes like Master Sergeant Rodriguez. What Danny didn't know was that his struggles had not gone unnoticed by Thomas Rodriguez. The veteran sergeant had been quietly observing the young soldier for months, recognizing in Danny's determination and persistence qualities that reminded him of his own early days in the military. Thomas had also struggled initially, facing ridicule from more experienced soldiers who questioned whether he had what it took to succeed in the demanding world of military service. As Thomas continued his farewell rounds, he stopped by the motor pool where Danny was assigned to maintenance duties. The young soldier was working alone, methodically cleaning equipment with the kind of attention to detail that Thomas had learned to appreciate over the years. While other soldiers might have cut corners or rushed through such mundane tasks, Danny approached every assignment with genuine effort, even when no one was watching. Kim Thomas called out, causing the young soldier to jump to attention with obvious nervousness. "Yes, Master Sergeant," Danny responded, his voice betraying his anxiety at being addressed by such a senior and respected figure. Thomas studied the young man's face, noting the exhaustion and discouragement that seemed to weigh on his shoulders like an invisible burden. He had seen that expression before, on the faces of young soldiers who were on the verge of giving up on themselves and their military careers. It was a look that always stirred something protective in Thomas's heart. "I've been watching your work lately," Thomas said, his tone neither critical nor praising, simply observational. "You put a lot of effort into everything you do, even the jobs that other soldiers might rush through." Danny's face flushed with embarrassment, assuming that his work was being criticized. "I'm sorry if I'm too slow, Master Sergeant. I know I'm not as fast as the other soldiers, but I try to do things right." The response confirmed what Thomas had suspected about the young soldier's character. Despite facing constant challenges and criticism, Danny remained committed to doing his best work, even when he felt like a failure. Thomas recognized that kind of integrity and determination as the foundation of true military service, more valuable than physical strength or technical skill alone. "Who told you that you were too slow?" Thomas asked, his voice taking on a slightly sharper edge that suggested he might have words with anyone who had been unnecessarily harsh with the young soldier. Danny hesitated, unwilling to complain about his fellow soldiers or supervisors. "No one specifically, Master Sergeant. It's just obvious that I'm not as good as everyone else. I've been thinking that maybe the army isn't the right place for me." The admission hung in the air between them, and Thomas felt a familiar stirring of the protective instincts that had driven him to risk his life for fellow soldiers countless times over the years. He saw in Danny not a failure, but a young man who needed guidance and encouragement to discover his own potential for service and sacrifice. Across the base, final preparations were underway for Thomas's retirement ceremony. The stage had been erected in the main courtyard, decorated with flags and banners honoring his service. The bass band was rehearsing patriotic songs, and the honor guard was practicing their ceremonial duties. Colonel Hayes reviewed her speech one final time, reflecting on the many ways Thomas had contributed to the success of their unit and the safety of countless soldiers under his leadership. Thomas's wife, Maria, arrived early with their children, carrying the formal civilian clothes her husband would change into after the ceremony, symbolically marking the end of his military career and the beginning of the next chapter of their lives together. She felt a mixture of pride in his accomplishments and relief that his dangerous military service was finally coming to an end. As the ceremony time approached, soldiers began gathering in the courtyard, many sharing stories about how Thomas had influenced their own military careers. Some spoke of times when his leadership had kept them safe in combat situations. Others remembered his willingness to mentor young soldiers or his advocacy for fair treatment of all personnel, regardless of their background or abilities. What none of them knew was that their honored guest was still in the motor pool, engaged in a conversation that would ultimately delay his farewell ceremony and create one of the most memorable moments in Fort Benjamin's history. Thomas Rodriguez was about to make a decision that would demonstrate once again why he was considered a true leader and hero by everyone who served with him. General William Morrison arrived at Fort Benjamin 30 minutes before the scheduled ceremony, staff car pulling up to the base headquarters where Colonel Hayes waited to brief him on the proceedings. The general had specifically requested to attend Thomas Rodriguez's retirement ceremony, having heard about the Master Sergeant's exceptional service record from multiple sources throughout his command. As a 3-star general with over 30 years of military experience, Morrison rarely attended individual retirement ceremonies. But Thomas's reputation for heroism and leadership had earned him this rare honor. Colonel Hayes escorted the general through the base, pointing out various facilities and discussing the unit's recent achievements. As they walked toward the ceremony site, she spoke with obvious pride about Thomas's contributions to the base and his influence on younger soldiers. "General Master Sergeant Rodriguez represents everything we hope to achieve in developing military leaders. His impact on this unit will be felt for years to come." Meanwhile, in the motor pool, Thomas continued his conversation with Danny Kim. Unaware that hundreds of people were beginning to gather for his farewell ceremony, the young soldier had revealed more about his struggles, including his plan to request discharge from the military. Thomas listened carefully, recognizing the pain and frustration in Danny's voice as he described feeling like a constant disappointment to his unit and his family. "Kim, let me tell you something about my first year in the Army," Thomas said, settling onto a nearby crate to indicate this would be a longer conversation. "I was probably the worst soldier in my training company. I couldn't do push-ups. I got lost during navigation exercises, and I was so nervous during weapons training that I could barely hit the target." Danny looked surprised by this admission, finding it difficult to believe that the decorated hero before him had ever struggled with basic military tasks. "But Master Sergeant, you're a war hero. You've saved so many lives." Thomas smiled at the young man's amazement. "It's exactly my point, Kim. Heroes aren't born ready-made. They're ordinary people who refuse to quit when things get difficult. The difference between soldiers who succeed and those who don't isn't talent or natural ability. It's persistence and the willingness to keep trying even when everything seems impossible." At the ceremony site, the scheduled start time was rapidly approaching. Maria Rodriguez checked her watch nervously, wondering where her husband could be. She knew Thomas was methodical about punctuality, especially for important military functions. Colonel Hayes sent an aide to locate the guest of honor, while General Morrison waited patiently, engaged in conversation with other senior officers who had come to pay their respects. The aide found Thomas still in the motor pool, deep in conversation with Danny. "Master Sergeant, sir, the ceremony is scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. General Morrison is here, and everyone is waiting for you." Thomas looked up with surprise, realizing how much time had passed during his conversation with the young soldier. However, instead of immediately jumping up to rush to his own ceremony, he turned back to Danny with serious concern. "Kim, I need you to promise me something. Don't make any decisions about leaving the army until we've had a chance to talk more. Will you do that for me?" Danny nodded, clearly moved by the fact that such a respected soldier was taking time to counsel him, especially on what should have been one of the most important days of Thomas's military career. "Yes, Master Sergeant, I promise." "Good. Now I want you to come to my ceremony. I think you could benefit from hearing what people have to say about military service and what it really means to be a soldier." The invitation surprised Danny, who had assumed that retirement ceremonies were only for senior personnel and invited guests. "Master Sergeant, I don't think I belong at something like that. It's for heroes and important people." Thomas stood up and placed a firm hand on Danny's shoulder. "Son, every person wearing this uniform belongs at ceremonies that honor military service. You're not a spectator in the army. You're part of it. That means you belong wherever soldiers gather to recognize service and sacrifice." They walked together toward the ceremony site, Thomas still in his work uniform, rather than the dress blues he had planned to change into. As they approached the crowd, Colonel Hayes spotted them and hurried over with obvious relief mixed with concern about the delay. "Master Sergeant General Morrison is waiting. We're already 15 minutes behind schedule," she said, trying to balance respect for Thomas's rank and service with the practical necessities of managing a high-level military ceremony. "Colonel, my apologies for the delay. I was counseling one of our soldiers who needed some guidance." Thomas gestured toward Danny, who looked overwhelmed by the attention he was receiving from such senior officers. General Morrison approached the group, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. The general was known for his strict adherence to military protocol and his expectation that scheduled events would proceed on time. His presence at the ceremony was a significant honor. Keeping him waiting could be seen as a serious breach of military courtesy. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez," the general said, his voice carrying the authority of years of command. "I understand there was some delay." Thomas came to attention and rendered a sharp salute.
"Sir, is providing counseling to Private First?"
Class Kim, who was experiencing some difficulties with his military service. "I felt it was important to address his concerns before they led to more serious problems." The general's eyes shifted to Danny, who looked terrified at being the center of attention from such high-ranking officers. Morrison studied the young soldier for a moment, taking in his nervous demeanor and the obvious respect he showed toward Thomas despite his own struggles. "Private Kim," the general said, "what kind of difficulties were you discussing with Master Sergeant Rodriguez?" Danny's voice shook as he attempted to respond. "Sir, I've been having trouble meeting the standards expected of soldiers in my unit. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was trying to help me understand that persistence is more important than natural ability." General Morrison nodded slowly, seeming to consider both the substance of the conversation and the fact that Thomas had been willing to delay his own retirement. Ceremony to counsel a struggling soldier? The general's military experience had taught him to recognize authentic leadership when he saw it. And Thomas's actions were demonstrating exactly the kind of character that had earned him his reputation for heroism. "Master Sergeant," the general said, "your ceremony has been delayed by 20 minutes because you were taking care of a soldier who needed guidance. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir. I felt Private Kim's immediate needs were more important than maintaining the schedule for my retirement ceremony." The response created a moment of silence among the gathered officers. Everyone present understood the significance of what Thomas had done. Military ceremonies, especially those honoring distinguished service, followed strict protocols and timing. General Morrison's time was extremely valuable. Keeping him waiting could have serious consequences for everyone involved. However, Thomas had made a choice that exemplified the values he had demonstrated throughout his military career, putting the welfare of fellow soldiers above his own interests, even at potentially significant personal cost. General Morrison studied Thomas Rodriguez for a long moment, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. The assembled crowd of soldiers, families, and dignitaries waited in uncomfortable silence, aware that they were witnessing an unprecedented situation. Military protocol had been disrupted, and the consequences remained unclear. Colonel Hayes shifted nervously, calculating the potential diplomatic and career implications of the delay. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez," the general finally said, his voice measured and deliberate, "in your 22 years of service, you have faced enemy fire, saved countless lives, and earned the respect of everyone who has served with you. Today, you chose to risk embarrassing a general officer and disrupting an important ceremony to counsel one struggling soldier. Help me understand your reasoning." Thomas maintained his military bearing while choosing his words carefully. He understood that his response could affect not only his own reputation but also the careers of Colonel Hayes and other officers who had organized the ceremony. However, he also knew that this moment represented everything he believed about military leadership and the responsibilities senior soldiers had toward their junior personnel. "Sir, throughout my career I've learned that the most important battles we fight aren't always against foreign enemies. Sometimes they're against the discouragement and despair that can destroy a soldier's spirit before they ever face combat. Private Kim was fighting that kind of battle today, and I felt he needed immediate support before making a decision that could affect the rest of his life." Danny Kim stood frozen beside Thomas, overwhelmed by the realization that his personal struggles had become the center of attention at such an important military ceremony. He felt responsible for creating what appeared to be a serious problem for the master sergeant who had tried to help him. The guilt was almost overwhelming, and he considered speaking up to take full blame for the situation. General Morrison's attention turned to Danny, his experienced eyes taking in the young soldier's obvious distress and the genuine respect he showed toward Thomas. Despite the difficult circumstances, Private Kim, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, has risked significant consequences to provide you with counseling. What did you learn from your conversation with him?" Danny's voice was barely audible as he struggled to respond. "Sir, Master Sergeant Rodriguez taught me that being a good soldier isn't about being perfect or never struggling. It's about persistence and refusing to quit when things get difficult. He helped me understand that everyone faces challenges, even heroes like him." The response seemed to resonate with General Morrison, who had his own memories of struggling young soldiers who had gone on to distinguished military careers when given proper guidance and encouragement. He recognized in Danny's words the kind of lesson that could only be learned through personal mentorship from experienced leaders. Maria Rodriguez watched from the crowd with growing anxiety. Knowing her husband well enough to understand that he had acted according to his deepest convictions about military service and leadership, she had seen him make similar choices throughout their marriage, always putting the welfare of other soldiers ahead of his own interests. While she admired his character, she also worried about the consequences of his decision to delay such an important ceremony. Colonel Hayes decided to intervene diplomatically, hoping to resolve the situation in a way that honored both military protocol and Thomas's intentions. "General Morrison, if I may. Master Sergeant Rodriguez's actions today are entirely consistent with the leadership he has demonstrated throughout his service here. His commitment to developing junior soldiers has been one of his most valuable contributions to our unit." General raised a hand to indicate he had heard the colonel's comment but wanted to continue his own assessment of the situation. His years of military experience had taught him to look beyond surface appearances and protocol violations to understand the deeper character issues that drove people's actions. Master Sergeant General Morrison said, "You have put me in an interesting position. On one hand, military discipline requires adherence to scheduled protocols, especially when senior officers have arranged their time to honor distinguished service. On the other hand, you have demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and commitment to soldier welfare that earned you the decorations and reputation we're here to celebrate." Thomas remained at attention but felt compelled to address the generals. Observation directly. Sir, I understand that my actions may have created difficulties, and I take full responsibility for any problems caused by the delay. However, I could not in good conscience walk away from a soldier who needed immediate guidance, even for my own retirement ceremony. The crowd of soldiers listening to this exchange found themselves witnessing something unprecedented. In their military experience, they were observing a master sergeant willing to accept consequences for putting soldier welfare above military protocol, and a general officer trying to balance competing demands of discipline and leadership development. Private First Class Jennifer Walsh, who had served in the same unit as Danny Kim, felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to Thomas defend his actions. She had observed Danny's struggles and had sometimes participated in the casual jokes and comments that made his military service even more difficult. Hearing Thomas's passionate defense of a soldier that others dismissed as inadequate made her reconsider her own behavior and attitudes. Sergeant Major Robert Chen, senior enlisted advisor to Colonel Hayes, stepped forward with the kind of respectful boldness that his position allowed. General Morrison, if I may offer a perspective from the enlisted ranks, Master Sergeant Rodriguez's actions today demonstrate why he has been so effective as a leader and mentor. His soldiers know that he will never abandon them, even when it's personally costly. General Morrison acknowledged the Sergeant Major's comment with a nod, then returned his attention to Thomas and Danny. The general's own rise through military ranks had been marked by mentors who had taken personal risks to guide and develop him during difficult periods of his career. He understood the value of leaders who were willing to prioritize individual soldier development over institutional convenience. Private Kim, the general said, you find yourself at the center of a situation that has disrupted military protocol and created significant attention. How do you feel about Master Sergeant Rodriguez's decision to delay his ceremony for your benefit? Danny struggled to find words adequate to express his emotional state. Sir, I feel terrible that I've caused problems for Master Sergeant Rodriguez and for everyone who planned this ceremony. But I also feel hopeful, sir. For the first time since I joined the Army, I feel like maybe I can succeed if I keep trying and don't give up on myself. The honesty and vulnerability in Danny's response seemed to affect everyone present, including General Morrison. The young soldier's willingness to acknowledge his struggles while expressing genuine gratitude for Thomas's mentorship represented exactly the kind of character development that effective military leadership was designed to achieve. General Morrison made a decision that would be discussed and analyzed in military leadership courses for years to come. Instead of addressing the protocol violation or moving immediately to the delayed ceremony, he chose to turn the situation into a teaching moment about the true nature of military service and leadership. General Morrison walked closer to the assembled crowd, his decision clearly forming as he observed the faces of soldiers, family members, and officers who had gathered to honor Thomas Rodriguez. The general's extensive military experience had taught him to recognize pivotal moments that could serve as powerful teaching opportunities, and he sensed that this disrupted ceremony could become something far more meaningful than a standard retirement celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, General Morrison announced in a voice that carried easily across the courtyard, we are gathered here today to honor Master Sergeant Thomas Rodriguez for 22 years of distinguished military service.
However, the
events of the past 30 minutes have provided us with an unexpected demonstration of why this man truly deserves our recognition and respect. The crowd stirred with curiosity and relief, sensing that the general's tone suggested a positive resolution rather than disciplinary action. Maria Rodriguez felt her tension begin to ease as she recognized that her husband's character was being acknowledged rather than criticized. Colonel Hayes maintained her professional composure while mentally preparing to support whatever direction the general decided to take. Master Sergeant Rodriguez has earned numerous decorations for valor in combat, the general continued, but today he has demonstrated something equally important: the moral courage to prioritize soldier welfare over personal convenience or institutional protocol. This is the kind of leadership that builds strong military units and develops effective soldiers. Thomas remained at attention, but Danny Kim looked increasingly uncomfortable with being the focus of so much attention. The young soldier had never imagined that his personal struggles would become the centerpiece of a senior officer's retirement ceremony, and he felt both grateful for the support and overwhelmed by the public nature of his difficulties. General Morrison gestured for Danny to step forward, a command that made the private's face pale with anxiety. "Private Kim, you were prepared to leave military service because you felt inadequate compared to other soldiers. Master Sergeant Rodriguez invested his time and reputation to convince you that persistence and character matter more than natural ability. I want you to understand something important about military service." The general's voice took on the tone of a seasoned leader, sharing hard-earned wisdom with younger soldiers. "Every person wearing this uniform has faced moments when they questioned their ability to meet military standards. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail is not talent or strength. It's the willingness to accept guidance from experienced leaders and to keep trying when everything seems impossible." Danny's voice was shaky as he responded, "Yes, sir. I'm beginning to understand that." "Good," General Morrison replied. "Now I want you to look around this courtyard at the soldiers who came here today to honor Master Sergeant Rodriguez. Many of them have been where you are right now. They've struggled with training, felt inadequate, and wondered if they belonged in the military. But they persisted, often because someone like Master Sergeant Rodriguez took the time to believe in them. When they couldn't believe in themselves, Staff Sergeant Lisa Martinez, standing near the front of the crowd, felt the general's words resonate deeply with her own experience. 3 years earlier, she had been a struggling private who considered leaving the military after repeatedly failing leadership evaluations. Helping her develop the confidence and skills that eventually led to her promotion and success as a team leader, Captain James Foster, now commanding a company in another unit, remembered his own difficult transition from civilian to military life 8 years earlier. Thomas had been his first sergeant then, providing the guidance and patience that transformed a confused young officer into an effective military leader. The ceremony was bringing back memories of how Thomas's mentorship had shaped multiple military careers. General Morrison continued his impromptu address, using the situation to highlight broader lessons about military leadership and service. "The true measure of a military leader is not just how they perform under enemy fire, although Master Sergeant Rodriguez has certainly proven himself in that regard. The true measure is how they develop and support the soldiers entrusted to their care, especially those who struggle with the challenges of military life." Colonel Hayes found herself deeply moved by the general's handling of the situation. Rather than treating the delayed ceremony as a protocol violation requiring discipline, she realized she was witnessing exceptional leadership that prioritized substance over procedure. Thomas finally spoke, his voice carrying the emotion of someone who had spent decades caring for fellow soldiers. "General Morrison, if I may, Private Kim's situation reminded me why I chose to make the military my career. It's not about the medals or recognition. It's about the opportunity to make a positive difference in the lives of young people who are willing to serve their country, even when they doubt their own abilities." The statement encapsulated everything that had made Thomas Rodriguez such an effective and beloved leader throughout his military career. His willingness to invest personally in the development of struggling soldiers had created a ripple effect of positive influence that extended far beyond his immediate unit or assignment. Danny Kim felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also profoundly grateful for the support he was receiving from such senior military leaders. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez, General Morrison, I want you to know that this conversation has changed how I think about military service and my own potential. I won't forget the lessons you've taught me today." General Morrison nodded approvingly at Danny's response, then addressed the broader crowd once again. This young soldier's willingness to acknowledge his struggles and accept guidance is exactly the kind of character that can lead to successful military service. We should all remember that strength is not about never falling down. It's about getting back up and continuing to move forward. The general's words seemed to resonate throughout the assembled crowd, many of whom were reflecting on their own military experiences and the mentors who had helped them overcome various challenges. The ceremony was becoming something far more meaningful than a standard retirement celebration, Sergeant Major Chen approached General Morrison and spoke quietly. "Sir, the delay has actually created something special here. The soldiers are experiencing a real-time demonstration of the leadership, principles that Master Sergeant Rodriguez has embodied throughout his career." "Exactly, Sergeant Major," the general replied. "Sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected moments rather than planned presentations. Today's events have shown us what authentic military leadership looks like in action." As the impromptu teaching session continued, what had begun as a disrupted retirement ceremony was evolving into a powerful testimonial about the lasting impact of dedicated military mentorship. Staff Sergeant Lisa Martinez stepped forward from the crowd, her voice carrying the confidence that Thomas Rodriguez had helped her develop over the years. "General Morrison, sir, with permission to speak, I'd like to share something about Master Sergeant Rodriguez that relates to what Private Kim is experiencing." General Morrison nodded encouragingly, recognizing that the soldiers' testimonials were creating a more powerful tribute to Thomas than any formal speech could provide. "Please proceed, Staff Sergeant." "3 years ago, I was ready to quit the military," Martinez began, her words drawing surprised looks from soldiers who knew her as a strong and capable leader. "I had failed my leadership evaluation twice, and my commanding officer recommended that I consider civilian career alternatives. I felt like a complete failure and was convinced I didn't belong in the Army." The admission surprised many in the crowd, who had only known Martinez as a successful non-commissioned officer. Her willingness to share her struggles publicly was giving other soldiers permission to acknowledge their own difficult moments without shame. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez didn't just offer me encouragement," Martinez continued. "He spent his personal time helping me develop leadership skills, practice decision-making scenarios, and build the confidence I needed to succeed. But most importantly, he helped me understand that struggling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Thomas felt emotional hearing Martinez's testimony, remembering the countless hours they had spent working through leadership challenges and building her confidence. Seeing her now as a respected staff sergeant, leading her own team, was one of the most rewarding aspects of his military career. Captain Foster also stepped forward, his officer's uniform drawing respectful attention from the enlisted soldiers. "Present. General Morrison, I'd like to add my own experience with Master Sergeant Rodriguez. 8 years ago, it was my first sergeant when I was a brand new lieutenant who thought I knew everything about leadership but actually knew nothing." Several soldiers chuckled knowingly at the captain's description, remembering their own early military confidence that had been tempered by experience and good mentorship. Foster continued with obvious respect for Thomas's influence on his development. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez could have let me make mistakes and learn the hard way, which would have been easier for him personally. Instead, he took the time to teach me how to truly lead soldiers, how to make difficult decisions under pressure, and most importantly, how to take care of the people entrusted to my command. Every successful thing I've done as an officer can be traced back to lessons he taught me." General Morrison observed the growing number of soldiers who wanted to share their own stories about Thomas's mentorship and influence. The ceremony was transforming into something unprecedented in his experience, a genuine demonstration of how one person's commitment to developing others had created a network of better leaders throughout the military. Danny Kim listened to these testimonials with growing amazement, beginning to understand that his struggles were not unique or shameful, but simply part of the process that many successful soldiers had experienced. The realization that people he respected had faced similar challenges was changing his entire perspective on his military potential. "Private Kim," General Morrison said, bringing the focus back to the young soldier whose struggles had initiated this entire discussion. "You're hearing from soldiers and officers who have succeeded in their military careers. Despite facing significant challenges early on, what they all have in common is that they had mentors who invested in their development and helped them persist through difficult periods." Danny's voice was stronger now, influenced by the confidence he was drawing from the testimonials around him. "Sir, I'm beginning to understand that struggling doesn't mean failing, and that accepting help doesn't mean weakness. I want to earn the kind of respect that these soldiers have for Master Sergeant Rodriguez." Thomas stepped forward, unable to remain silent while listening to testimonials about his impact on other soldiers' careers. General Morrison, if I may. These soldiers are giving me credit for their own hard work and dedication. All I did was recognize their potential and provide some guidance. They did the difficult work of changing and growing. Master Sergeant General Morrison replied, "That modest attitude is exactly why you've been so effective as a mentor and leader. Great leaders don't take credit for others' successes. They create conditions that allow people to discover and develop their own capabilities." Maria Rodriguez watched her husband with the pride and admiration that had sustained their marriage through multiple deployments and the challenges of military life. She was seeing him recognized, not just for his combat heroism, but for the quieter acts of leadership and mentorship that had defined his character. Throughout their relationship, Colonel Hayes realized that the ceremony had evolved into something far more meaningful than the standard retirement event she had originally planned. The organic testimonials from soldiers at all levels were creating a powerful demonstration of authentic military leadership that would be remembered by everyone, present long after formal speeches were forgotten. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Morrison announced, "we have witnessed something remarkable here today. What began as a delayed ceremony has become a masterclass in military leadership and the importance of investing in individual soldier development. Master Sergeant Rodriguez's decision to prioritize Private Kim's needs over his own ceremony schedule demonstrates the values that have made him such an effective leader throughout his career." The general paused, allowing his words to resonate with the assembled crowd before continuing. "I want everyone present to understand that the most important battles we fight as military leaders are often the ones that take place in soldiers' hearts and minds. Master Sergeant Rodriguez has been fighting and winning those battles for 22 years, creating better soldiers and leaders who have gone on to positively influence countless others." Sergeant Major Chen approached the general with a suggestion that had been forming as he listened to the testimonials. "Sir, with your permission, I think Private Kim should have the honor of presenting Master Sergeant Rodriguez's retirement certificate. It would symbolize how his mentorship has come full circle." The suggestion surprised everyone, including Danny, who looked terrified at the prospect of such a visible role in the ceremony. Traditional military protocol would typically assign such honors to senior officers or distinguished guests, not to struggling junior enlisted soldiers. General Morrison considered the suggestion carefully, recognizing its symbolic power while also understanding the potential impact on Danny's confidence and self-image. "Private Kim, are you willing to accept that honor?" Danny's voice shook with emotion as he responded, "Sir, I would be deeply honored, but I don't want to take that privilege away from someone more deserving." Thomas Rodriguez intervened with the kind of gentle authority that had characterized his leadership style throughout his career. "Son, you are deserving. Your willingness to acknowledge your struggles and accept guidance makes you exactly the kind of soldier we want representing the future of military service." The moment Danny Kim stepped forward to accept the honor of presenting Thomas Rodriguez's retirement certificate, everyone present understood they were witnessing something unprecedented in military ceremony tradition. A struggling young soldier was being entrusted with one of the most significant roles in honoring a decorated war hero, symbolizing the transformative power of mentorship and the belief in human potential that defined Thomas's entire career. General Morrison handed Danny the official retirement certificate. It's a formal document that represented the culmination of Thomas's 22 years of distinguished military service. The young soldier's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the responsibility, overwhelmed by the trust being placed in him by such senior military leadership. "Private Kim," General Morrison said in a voice that carried across the courtyard, "this certificate represents more than Master Sergeant Rodriguez's individual achievements. His belief that every person in uniform has value and potential, and his understanding that true military strength comes from taking care of each other." Danny took a deep breath, drawing on the confidence that Thomas had helped him discover during their conversation in the motor pool. As he began to speak, his voice grew stronger with each word. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez, on behalf of the United States Army and everyone whose lives you have touched, I present you with this certificate of retirement in recognition of your 22 years of faithful and distinguished service to our nation. The ceremony continued with an emotional power that no one had anticipated. As Danny handed the certificate to Thomas, their brief handshake represented far more than a formal transfer of documents. It symbolized the passing of wisdom from a generation of soldiers to another, the belief in redemption and second chances, and the understanding that everyone deserves someone who believes in their potential. Thomas accepted the certificate with visible emotion, understanding that this moment represented not just his own retirement, but also a young soldier's renewed commitment to military service. Thank you, Private Kim. This honor means more to me than any medal I've ever received, because it represents the real purpose of military leadership, helping others discover their own capacity for service and sacrifice. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, with many soldiers wiping away tears as they witnessed the conclusion of this unexpected ceremony. Maria Rodriguez felt overwhelming pride in her husband, not just for his military achievements, but for his character and his commitment to helping others, even at personal cost. General Morrison stepped forward to deliver his closing remarks, having witnessed something that would influence his own leadership philosophy for years to come. Today, we have seen authentic military leadership in action. Master Sergeant Rodriguez chose to delay his own ceremony to counsel a struggling soldier. The general's voice carried the weight of decades of military experience as he continued, "Private Kim, your willingness to share your struggles publicly and accept guidance has provided all of us with important lessons about courage, humility, and the value of perseverance. You have honored Master Sergeant Rodriguez's investment in you by your conduct today." As the formal ceremony concluded, soldiers began approaching both Thomas and Danny to offer congratulations and share their own stories of overcoming military challenges. What had started as one person's retirement celebration had become a community affirmation of the values that made military service meaningful and worthwhile. Colonel Hayes approached General Morrison as the crowd began to disperse. "Sir, I want to thank you for turning what could have been a disciplinary situation into a powerful teaching moment. Lessons about leadership and priorities that will influence our unit for years to come." The general nodded thoughtfully. Colonel Master Sergeant Rodriguez created the teaching moment through his actions. "I simply recognized its value and made sure we didn't waste the opportunity to learn from it. The best military training often comes from real situations rather than classroom instruction." Weeks later, Danny Kim's transformation became one of the most remarkable success stories in the unit's recent history. Inspired by Thomas's belief in his potential and the support he had received from the military community, Danny dedicated himself to improving his physical fitness, technical skills, and military knowledge. His scores began improving dramatically. His attitude shifted from defeated resignation to determined optimism. Thomas, now a civilian, maintained contact with Danny and other soldiers he had mentored throughout his career. He discovered that retirement from active duty didn't end his ability to influence and support military personnel. It simply changed the context in which that mentorship occurred. His reputation for developing soldiers continued to grow even after he left the service. 6 months after the retirement ceremony, Danny Kim was selected for advanced technical training, his dramatic improvement earning recognition from his new commanding officers. When asked about the source of his transformation, Danny always credited the conversation in the motor pool and the ceremony, where a general officer had chosen to honor his potential rather than focus on his failures. General Morrison incorporated the lessons from that day into his leadership development programs, using the story of Thomas Rodriguez and Danny Kim to illustrate important principles about mentorship, character, and the true meaning of military service. The incident that had begun with a delayed ceremony became a case study in effective leadership that was shared throughout military education institutions. Thomas Rodriguez's retirement ceremony had indeed been stopped for what many initially considered a nobody. But as General Morrison had recognized that day, there are no nobodies in military service, only soldiers at different stages of their development, who need different kinds of support and guidance. The general's decision to honor that principle, rather than simply enforcing protocol, Distinguished Military Career, the ceremony. That day proved that sometimes the most important victories are not won on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when one person chooses to believe in another's potential, even when it comes at personal cost. Thomas Rodriguez had demonstrated that heroism comes in many forms, and that the greatest leaders are often those who are willing to delay their own recognition to ensure that no soldier is left behind, not in combat, and not in the struggle to become the person they are capable of being.